What if I told you that one of America's most trusted financial institutions started not as a modern bank, but as a dangerous frontier business? A company that transported gold through robbery-prone routes, moved money across a wild and unstable America, built its reputation when one mistake could mean losing someone's life savings, and became a symbol of trust for generations. But then something changed. The same institution that once protected people's money was later accused of secretly creating millions of fake accounts in the names of its own customers. Think about that for a second. How does a company spend more than 150 years building trust and then nearly destroy that reputation from inside? Was it greed, bad leadership, a toxic corporate culture, or something much deeper? Today we are talking about a company whose story is not just about banking. It is about ambition, power, expansion, scandal, and survival. A company that survived the gold rush, adapted after Stagecoaches became obsolete, expanded into one of America's biggest financial giants, then became the face of one of the most shocking corporate scandals in modern banking history. And the most interesting part, its story is still not over. Because even in 2026, this company is still fighting to rebuild what it lost. And that company is Wells Fargo. To understand Wells Fargo, we first need to understand the men who built it. Because this company did not begin inside a shiny corporate office. It began because two men saw chaos and saw profit hidden inside it. The first was Henry Wells, born on December 12, 1805, in Thetford, Vermont, USA. He came from a modest farming family. His father's name was Shipley Wells, and his mother was Polly Chapman Wells. This was not a wealthy business dynasty. Henry grew up in a simple environment where hard work was normal. As a young man, he did not attend any famous university like modern CEOs often do. In fact, his formal education was quite limited. Instead, he learned through real-world work. As a teenager, he worked as a shoemaker's apprentice and later entered the freight and transportation business. Interestingly, Henry also suffered from a severe stutter, something that could have destroyed a businessman's confidence. But instead of letting that weakness define him, he built his career through sharp business judgment and persistence. The second man was William George Fargo, born on May 20, 1818, in Pompey, New York, USA. He came from a large working-class family and was the eldest of 12 children. His father, William C. Fargo, worked as a farmer, so William's childhood was far from luxury. Life was practical, disciplined, and built around hard work. He attended local schools, but like Henry, he did not become successful because of elite education. His real education came from experience. At a very young age, William started working as a mail carrier, carrying letters over long distances. This may sound like a small job, but think about what he was learning without realizing it. Speed, route planning, reliability, logistics, timing, and customer trust. These exact skills would later help him build a business empire. Now here's where the story becomes interesting. These two men were not beginners experimenting with a random business idea. Before Wells Fargo even existed, both Henry Wells and William Fargo had already helped build American Express, one of America's major express delivery companies at the time. That means they already understood one powerful business principle. In a fast-growing economy, whoever controls the movement of money, goods, and communication can become incredibly powerful. Then came the event that changed America forever. In 1848, gold was discovered in California, and suddenly the entire country went into a frenzy. Thousands of people rushed west, hoping to become rich overnight. This became known as the California Gold Rush. But there was a huge problem. California was geographically isolated from the financial centers of the eastern United States. People could mine gold, but how would they send it safely? How would families receive money? How would merchants transfer payments? How would valuable documents survive dangerous cross-country journeys full of robbery, delays, and uncertainty? This was not just a problem. This was a massive business opportunity. But here's where the story takes a crucial turn. American Express was hesitant about aggressively expanding into California's risky and unstable market. Henry Wells and William Fargo saw things differently. Where others saw danger, they saw opportunity. Instead of waiting for American Express to make a decision, they chose to break away and build something of their own. So in 1852, they launched Wells, Fargo and Company. And here's the fascinating part. Wells Fargo did not begin as just a bank. It was a banking company, a transportation company, a money transfer network, a logistics business, and a secure delivery service all combined into one. It transported gold dust, cash, bullion, important letters, and valuable goods between California and the eastern United States. This is exactly where the iconic Wells Fargo Stagecoach identity was born. Because in that era, trust was not built through branding campaigns or television ads. Trust was built by successfully delivering someone's life savings across dangerous American territory. And that is how one of America's biggest banking giants was born. After launching in 1852, Wells Fargo did not grow slowly. It expanded aggressively because the opportunity in front of it was enormous. America was still developing, the western regions were risky and poorly connected, and people desperately needed a trusted system to move money, gold, and important goods. Wells Fargo stepped directly into that gap. Very quickly, the company became much more than a simple financial service. It became part of America's physical infrastructure. This is where the famous Wells Fargo Stagecoach story begins. Back then, transporting valuables was not easy. Roads were rough, journeys took weeks, robberies were common, and communication systems were weak. Yet Wells Fargo built its reputation by doing exactly what seemed dangerous: safely moving gold, cash, mail, and high-value goods across hostile territory. The company expanded its express delivery and transportation operations rapidly across the western United States. Then came another major milestone. In 1861, Wells Fargo became involved in the legendary Pony Express, operating the western route between Salt Lake City and San Francisco. Now think about what that meant in that era. Before phones, before emails, before digital banking, speed of communication itself was power. Whoever controlled fast delivery controlled commerce. Wells Fargo understood this very early. By 1866, the company had absorbed competitors and built one of the largest stagecoach and express transportation networks in the world. At this point, Wells Fargo was not just a business. It had become a symbol of reliability in America's expanding frontier economy. But then history changed. In 1869, the first transcontinental railroad was completed, and suddenly, Wells Fargo's biggest strength looked like it could become its biggest weakness. Because if trains could move people and goods faster, cheaper, and more efficiently, who would still need stagecoaches? For many companies, this would have been the end. This is where an important business lesson appears. Great companies are not destroyed only by competition. They are destroyed when they fail to adapt. Wells Fargo chose adaptation. Instead of staying trapped in an outdated transportation model, the company shifted deeper into banking, financial transfers, commercial services, and secure money movement. It understood something critical. Customers did not care about the vehicle. They cared about trust, speed, and reliability. And that shift changed everything. Slowly, Wells Fargo transformed from a frontier transport company into a serious financial institution. The stagecoaches became less important. The banking business became more important. And over decades, that transformation continued. But the Wells Fargo we know today was not built only by organic growth. Modern corporate America grows through mergers, and Wells Fargo played that game very well. One of the biggest turning points came in 1998, when Norwest Corporation acquired Wells Fargo. Interestingly, even though Norwest was technically the acquiring company, it kept the Wells Fargo name. Why? Because the Wells Fargo brand carried something far more valuable than corporate paperwork: trust, brand power, recognition. That name still meant reliability to millions of Americans. Then came another massive opportunity: the 2008 global financial crisis. While many financial institutions were collapsing, Wells Fargo made one of the boldest moves in its history by acquiring Wachovia.
$100 million over Wells Fargo's acquisition of Wachovia in 2008.
This dramatically expanded its size, customer base, branch network, and national influence. And just like that, Wells Fargo became one of the largest banks in the United States. By the early 2010s, it looked unstoppable. Millions of customers, thousands of branches, a dominant mortgage business, consumer banking, business lending, wealth management, massive revenues, from dangerous stagecoach routes to Wall Street-level banking power. It looked like the perfect American success story. But sometimes the biggest danger does not come from outside competition. Sometimes it grows quietly from inside the company itself. By the early 2000s, Wells Fargo looked like the perfect banking success story. It was one of America's most powerful financial institutions. Millions of customers trusted it with their savings. Thousands of branches operated across the country. Its mortgage business was massive. Its profits were strong. Investors loved it. Regulators saw it as one of the strongest major banks after the 2008 financial crisis. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But sometimes, the most dangerous problems inside a company are the ones customers cannot see. And in Wells Fargo's case, the real crisis was quietly growing inside its own culture. The company had become obsessed with one strategy: cross-selling. The idea sounded smart. If one customer already trusts your bank, why not sell them more products? A checking account, a savings account, a credit card, a debit card, a mortgage, insurance products, investment services. On paper, this looked like brilliant business strategy, because the more products one customer uses, the more profit the bank makes. But here's where things started going wrong. Over time, cross-selling stopped being a strategy and became an obsession. Management placed enormous pressure on employees to hit aggressive sales targets. Workers were expected to constantly sell more products, often under unrealistic expectations. And when jobs, promotions, and salaries depend on impossible targets, people start making bad decisions. This is one of the most dangerous patterns in corporate history. Not because employees are naturally dishonest, but because toxic incentive systems can push ordinary people toward unethical behavior. And that is exactly what happened. To meet targets, some employees began opening accounts customers never asked for. Fake checking accounts, unauthorized savings accounts, credit cards customers never approved, PIN numbers secretly created, email addresses manipulated. Customers often had no idea.
Fargo, employees called it gaming, forging customer signatures, creating PINs to activate unauthorized debit cards, and moving money to unauthorized accounts.
Some only discovered the fraud when fees appeared or their credit scores were affected. Now think about how shocking this is. This was not some small unknown company. This was Wells Fargo, a company whose entire brand had been built on trust since the 1800s. A company that once transported people's gold safely across dangerous American territory. And now, it was being accused of exploiting its own customers. Then in 2016, the scandal exploded publicly. Investigations revealed that this was not a small, isolated fraud. Approximately millions of unauthorized customer accounts had been created just to meet internal sales targets.
Tonight, the country's fourth largest bank, Wells Fargo, is paying up, agreeing to a $3 billion settlement with the Justice Department and the SEC after employees under pressure to meet sales goals created millions of fraudulent bank accounts between 2002 and 2016.
Thousands of employees were eventually fired. Customers were furious. The media exploded. Public outrage spread across America, and soon the scandal reached Washington. Top executives were called into highly public U.S. Senate hearings, where Wells Fargo's leadership faced intense questioning and national humiliation. This was no longer just a banking problem. This had become a national corporate scandal. CEO John Stumpf faced intense criticism and resigned in 2016 as public pressure kept growing.
Breaking right now, Wells Fargo CEO John Stumpf will resign in the wake of recent scandal over the bank's sales practices.
His successor, Tim Sloan, tried to stabilize the company, but pressure from regulators, politicians, and the public never fully disappeared. Eventually, he also resigned in 2019.
Wells Fargo CEO Tim Sloan says he is stepping down from the company effective immediately.
This showed something important. The scandal was not damaging just employees. It was taking down the company's top leadership. But the biggest punishment was still coming. In 2018, the Federal Reserve did something almost unprecedented. It imposed a strict asset cap on Wells Fargo. This meant the bank was not allowed to grow beyond approximately $1.95 trillion in assets. Now, for most viewers, that may not sound dramatic, but for a bank, this was like putting handcuffs on a marathon runner. Banks survive through growth, more deposits, more loans, more customers, more assets. That's how the business model works. But Wells Fargo was suddenly blocked from expanding. Imagine spending over 160 years building one of America's most powerful financial institutions, only to be told you are too broken to grow. That was not just a financial punishment, it was public humiliation. And perhaps the most painful part, the company's biggest asset had never been money, it had always been trust. And now, trust was exactly what it had lost. Then in 2019, a new man entered the story, Charlie Scharf, and his mission was very different from previous CEOs. He was not hired to aggressively grow the business, he was hired to repair the damage. Think about how difficult that job was. He was stepping into one of America's biggest banks at one of its weakest moments. Public trust was broken, regulators were watching closely, investors were frustrated, internal systems were damaged, and the company's reputation had collapsed. His job was to rebuild governance, improve compliance systems, strengthen risk controls, fix operational weaknesses, and somehow convince regulators that Wells Fargo had fundamentally changed. This was not glamorous leadership, this was corporate reconstruction. And reconstruction takes time. From 2019 to 2025, Wells Fargo spent years quietly working through regulatory requirements, closing enforcement actions, changing leadership structures, and cleaning up internal operations. Progress was slow, expensive, and often frustrating, but eventually the effort started showing results. Then came the major breakthrough. In 2025, after nearly 7 years, the Federal Reserve finally lifted the asset cap. That was a huge turning point, because for the first time since 2018, Wells Fargo was free to grow normally again. For investors and management, this was a major victory. Then in 2026, another important milestone arrived. A major regulatory enforcement action linked to the fake accounts scandal was officially terminated. On paper, this looked like redemption, but reality is more complicated. Because regulations can be removed, restrictions can be lifted, balance sheets can recover, but public trust does not automatically return. And that brings us to Wells Fargo today. In 2026, Wells Fargo remains one of America's largest financial institutions, with massive operations across consumer banking, business banking, wealth management, and investment banking. Financially, the giant survived. But the deeper question is different. Did it survive emotionally in the minds of customers? Because size does not create trust. History does not create trust. Profit does not create trust. Trust has to be rebuilt. And that is what makes the Wells Fargo story so fascinating. A company that began in 1852 protecting people's gold in dangerous frontier America later damaged its own reputation in the modern financial world. Now it says it has changed. But only time will answer the real question. Can a company that spent more than 170 years building trust truly rebuild it after breaking it? So what do we learn from the Wells Fargo story? A company that started in 1852 by safely transporting gold, money, and valuables across dangerous America, built its empire on one simple thing: trust. That trust turned a small frontier business into one of America's biggest banking giants. But the biggest irony is this: the same company that became powerful because people trusted it nearly damaged itself because it forgot the value of that trust. When growth becomes more important than ethics, even the strongest institutions can start collapsing from the inside. That's why this is not just a banking story. It's a story about greed, leadership, corporate culture, and how bad systems can push ordinary people toward unethical decisions. Now in 2026, Wells Fargo has survived financially. The restrictions are largely gone, the company is growing again, and the giant is still standing. But survival is not the same as redemption. Because the real question is simple: has Wells Fargo truly changed, or is the trust still broken? A company that once carried people's gold across dangerous roads is now carrying something even more fragile: its reputation. If you enjoyed this documentary, let me know which company's story we should uncover next.